Hello everyone, my name is Laura Thompson and welcome to webinar 30. Hi guys, connection and rapport despite the distance. Just wait one moment. Oh gosh, they want me to introduce myself to the whole team on the Zoom meeting coming up. Oh God, there's about 150. Okay, let me practice. Hi everyone. My name's Tori Lumpson. Oh gosh, this is going to be so nerve-wracking. What's happened? I know I all know them, but I just feel really nervous doing it across the screen. Worry no more. Let's have a look at webinar 30. We're going to be looking at this whole concept of what does it mean now to be building connection and rapport despite the distance. So here we are, a big sort of group of bunch of juicy grapes, and how come some of us just feel like we're withering on the vine at the moment, and what does that mean in terms of us creating a really vibrant team culture even though we may never be in the physical same room this year. So series 6 has been more of an edutainment approach designed to encourage, empower, embolden us as we flex and stretch how we work in 2020. There's so much serious stuff going on right now. Learning, we passionately believe that should be the fun bit of a week, and it keeps us young, it keeps us foxy. And so what have we got in store for this webinar? Okay, well, as everything is starting to speed up again, that feeling of being left behind. So how do I take some deep breaths and keep up and evolve and grow? We are all experiencing the biggest shift in how we have worked in our lifetimes. So these episodes are situation based with a desire to be immediately practicable and inspired by the format of an agony aunt advice column. Starting with a Dear Debbie letter each week, we're going to explore some real life situations that can inhibit our potential and guide us to level up our confidence and success. And the real Debbie and I have been recording some accompanying podcasts, which are shorter, audio only, and just something to listen to in the background if you need a bit of a pep talk. So the Dear Debbie letter this week is, Dear Debbie, I've just returned from furlough. Everything has changed, but I do just want to crack on. Half of my team remained working in the office, and I'm one of the furloughed lot who's now mainly home-based and working virtually. We had a bad team meeting yesterday. Us homers felt a bit left out by the office team, who all sat together in our old room. I want to raise it with my manager, but I want to do it in the right way. What shall I do? Yours, a friend in need. So we'll get a direct response from the real Debbie as part of this whole webinar package. But the purpose of this webinar is just to explore some key things. So I took this from the HR Director magazine just recently, this aspect of loneliness and isolation. And I thought it was a really interesting point just to make. When we think about loneliness, we often think about isolation from family and loved ones, but employees often spend more time with their colleagues than anyone else. And as such, changes to the working environment can have a significant impact on the well-being of individuals. A book that I'm finding quite useful to tap into at night at the moment is Ryan Holiday, who I love. He wrote The Obstacle is the Way book. Stillness is the key. And actually, most religions, philosophies, cultures talk about the need to have some quiet time. They either call it meditation, prayer, stillness, mindfulness, but actually the power of actually having some quiet time to sit, think, reflect and review. Often those are the points that actually we look back and they either refresh us or we relearn stuff. But what happens if that stillness is so all around me? For some people that might be quite a challenge. So this 30-minute lunch and learn is a chance to think about how we can level up this aspect of connection and rapport despite the difference, in particular in a team environment. So we're going to be thinking about how can we create a vibrant, close and productive team, even though we might not be in a physical room for a while or ever, and it's certainly become a thing. So what we're going to be spending some time talking in this session about is what might be worth a consider if I want to feel closer to the team. How could we relate to each other to up our sense of connection? And then we're going to hear some practical insights from the fabulous, the ever flexible work coach, Lindsey Thompson-Wright, who will be joining me about halfway through, and we'll run it more as a Q&A. So I just want to kind of front end that Q&A bit, just to talk us through some things that just might be worth a consider, just to have bubbling away in our subconscious in terms of this rapport and connection, because these certainly are extraordinary times. So what might be worth a consider if I want to feel closer to the team? Because it's not very fun when you feel like you're the one penguin that's not involved in a huddle. So I understand the friend in need's need to write a letter. And just even from a kind of corporate point of view, inclusion is such a hot topic now. And how would we define inclusion? Well, it's the creation of an environment where groups or individuals with different backgrounds are culturally and socially accepted, welcomed and treated equally. So inclusion has been a growing hot topic, and quite rightly so. So how do we include everyone in with that? But what might that mean now, where actually physically we may be needing to exclude people from a certain room because of whatever reasons going on? What happens if half of your team are subject to a local lockdown and the other half are actually still free to meet? What impact does that then have in terms of how included or excluded I feel from that work huddle? And even just from an emotional point of view, it can really get us down if we feel like we're no longer part of that work family. And for many of the people that we've worked with over the years, their work is more than just a job. Some people have interacted with each other. They call each other work wives or work husbands, and a real big fundamental part of our life. So what might be worth a consider? Well, I guess one of the first things it's got me musing on is the power of the language that we use and the power of labelling. And just a quick story from my own personal life. It struck me the other day when I just watched a TV programme. They were talking about, oh, well, they come from a broken family. And I thought that's a really interesting concept to use, that labelling of a broken family, because maybe I could put myself in that position in terms of the family that I'm now in. But we don't feel very broken. In fact, another way of viewing a broken family, i.e. the original set in the team has kind of gone into a different set, we actually feel quite blended. So are we a broken team? We're no longer able to sit next to each other. Or are we now a blended team, which just the ways in which we interact and the people with whom we interrelate with might have changed a bit? Are we a blended team? And in fact, there's something rather wonderful when you position breaking apart and coming together, and you view it maybe from a bit of an artistic point of view, that actually there's a Japanese term, kintsukuroi, which is to repair with gold, the art of repairing something that's broken and putting a silver gold lacquer through it actually means that that original piece becomes more beautiful for having been broken. So could it be that this challenge that we're facing as a team actually makes us better? We have to work more intentionally at including each other, rather than just assuming that the two people who are not in the kitchen sharing the Friday night beers are okay with not being included. Could this challenge actually make us more mindful of how different people's lives are within our team? I bet we've had insights into people's personal and domestic lives that we just didn't know about when we were maybe all meeting in that same shared neutral space. So I wonder, in terms of the power of labelling, rather than us feeling broken apart, we're just blending in a slightly different way, so it feels good and it feels positive. And it just got me thinking that sometimes the power of labelling, it's either a good thing or a bad thing, can really set us on a course for how we then behave and think about things moving forward. So what does that mean in terms of creating rapport and connection? Maybe one size fits one, because it takes all sorts to make a team. So just think on this, if this message then came through to you. Why don't you introduce yourself to the whole team when we have our weekly Zoom meeting? I'm sure everyone would love to hear all about you, and I've got capacity to have 1,000 people live, so you can talk to them all at once. Now, for some people, that would be a highly exciting opportunity to connect and engage with the team. For other people, it would absolutely terrify them, and in actual fact, might alienate and disconnect them because they're so worried about how they come across. So I think it's worth just revisiting just some classic personality theories, and this is based on the work of Carl Jung. And for those of you who've done insights, it matches quite nicely with the insights profiling. So we've got the kind of the doves, the peacocks, the hawks and the owls, and different things kind of get kind of disrupt and get these birds in kind of a bit of a flutter, and different things then, you know, appeal and make them feel at ease. And the challenge we have is of course, the type of person we are, it might be easy to make an assumption that everyone else would find that a motivating way to connect. So for example, a peacock character, and how I would define a peacock character, is quite an outgoing actor type. So they might quite enjoy the opportunity of performing and getting validation from a big team meeting. Hundreds of people waving at them and giving them a kind of a greeting might really cheer them up for the whole day. And actually that is a feel good. More of a hawk character, so a red direct doer, actually they might be thinking, what's the point of doing that? Because actually I want to be able to have a conversation with people where we can talk about action, not just have lots of sort of small talk. And more of a reserved owl character, who's more of a thoughtful, precise person, might frankly just, that might leave them cold, the idea of having to introduce themselves for 30 seconds to the whole team. And a dove, or more of a steady, amiable character, rather would make friends in more of an intimate environment. So actually setting up one-to-ones might be a preferable way for a friend character to feel involved with the team. So in terms of even just creating rapport, there actually are some ways that inadvertently we could break rapport, because we terrify people by getting them to introduce themselves digitally. Whereas in a live room, people would just sit in their chair and wave, everyone would turn around and then it's kind of dealt with. But online, things feel often a little bit more like a performance. So maybe it's worth having a think about, well, who are the different characters within our team? How might we make sure that the people who actually quite like performing get a chance to shine? How do we make sure that those within the team who like to crack on and do things feel like they're set up, for example, in smaller steering teams, so they're able to actually talk directly about what they're going to be working on? Maybe for those people who like to be really precise and thoughtful about what they do, that there are other ways to communicate, so maybe more one-to-one. And with the steady friend characters, again, creating those opportunities to have pop-up conversations where maybe there's 2 or 3 as opposed to 20 or 30 might be more motivating for these. So the interesting thing I think this whole year has brought is that we may now be having to have team interactions that absolutely would have been done face to face this time 7 months ago. But now, by choice, or we're forced to, we may be having to use the screen as a way for that to be our place to meet. And I think it's just worth noticing that sometimes we may miss the fact that people are actually screaming in their seats thinking, oh God, this is just going to be really embarrassing. And you would have clocked that if you were physically in a room. So have a think about the last time your team got together and how vibrant was that. If you can't remember the last time you got together, maybe that's something to diarise in now. Think about the next scenario that's coming up and what might be a way just to tap into all sorts, because what might be motivating for you might be terrifying for someone else. And I guess it's that extent that people like to show up in front of large groups of people. And for some people, that's just their worst nightmare. And for others, that's a real buzz and something that would give them an adrenaline kick. So what can we do to then up our sense of connection with each other in terms of how we relate? So I think it's fascinating when you transfer wisdom from one world into another, because machines can't do that. So that's one of the gifts we have of a human brain, is we're able to pick up knowledge from one sphere and apply it to another sphere. So I thought it might be quite interesting to look at the world of love. And how do we then successfully love other people? And what does that mean in terms of maybe the language of love? Because there'll be some of us who, if we get into a bit of trouble, we just don't want to be letting people know that. We want to deal with it privately ourselves and then bring it out after. Whereas there might be other people in the team who feel far more comfortable reaching out and asking for support. So let's talk about language and transfer some wisdom from one realm to another, because it all boils down to relationships and how we feel with each other, yeah? So this book, I've never read it myself, but I've had a number of friends, highly intelligent friends, male and female, who've referenced the impact, the positive impact this book has had on their personal life. And what this 5 Languages of Love book looks at is how actually each of us kind of might have some preference for different types of language in terms of how we interact. So applying this to a world of work, words of affirmation might be really important to me. So I think you did a really good job there. Might just be just the little 3-second motivation that converts a day from horrendous to great because you gave me a word of affirmation and that worked for me in that moment. But maybe some quality time is how actually I feel like we're relating well. So what does that then mean? That means having some time in the diary where no one's looking at the clock, where we can actually have some quality time just to relate. That might be really important for some people. Tangible gifts. So what does that mean? That then means maybe you've sent me a donut in the post. Maybe you have done a bit of work on my behalf that sets me up for the project. That little gift of where I've given you something. I might not have heard from you all week. We might not have had any time together, but that little gift on one Friday just gets me back in the game because that makes me feel like we are related still. Physical touch. Now, for many of us, we're unable to physically touch maybe the people that we're working with, but here's just something I'll transfer into something I read recently, which absolutely astounded me. So even the thought of entering into a dark room, our pupils start to dilate. Even the thought of staring up at the sun, our pupils start to diminish. So our brains are exceptionally clever at imagining perceived sensory changes and getting our body prepared to receive that. So could it be that even when you greet each other on a team meeting, if you're a bit of a huggy team, what about if you were to say to each other, should we just pretend we're hugging? And actually in your mind, your body is gearing up for a hug, which at least is 50% better of feeling like you're never going to touch each other again. So that just might be worth a thought. Seemingly small as it seems, all of these things are only like 3-second stuff, but actually the perception that if we were here, we'd give each other a hug might be enough just to boost someone on a rainy Thursday morning. And the 5th language of love is acts of service. So I may not have spoken to you all week. We may have not had a one-to-one for months. We haven't got any money to send any gifts to each other. I'm not a hugger anyway, so I wouldn't have done that. But maybe I've done a favour for you, or I've done something that's alleviated your world that actually is an act of service. In that part there, what that does is it brings us back together again. So there's loads of stuff online about this, and it hasn't really been applied to a corporate world, but it's been applied to the world of child raising. So we've got our kind of personal love life and we've got our kind of child rearing. It hasn't really been applied to the world of work, but I think there's some fascinating opportunity to think here about how do we relate to each other as a team? Because many of the teams that we interact with each other love each other. They're best friends. They've worked together for years. They've been through highs and lows together. And how do you still feel part of that work family if you might not have seen each other for months, potentially years? So I guess the intention we could take from this is, what might I need to do to make sure that not only I express how I relate with others in the team in the way that I like it, so I might be saying thank you please and I think you're fab all the time, but maybe someone else would register it in a slightly different way. So let's hear from Lindsey. And the reason why I thought it'd just be so fab to have Lindsey in on this is Linz works as a cognitive behavioural coach, and I'll let her introduce herself, but I know she's had hundreds of conversations with people, as has Debs, which is why we'll do the podcast later, over this last extraordinary 6-7 months. And I thought it'd be really handy to hear some practical real life tips from what Linz has picked up that are trends and what seems to be working or not working, with the view to then give us some food for thought to help increase our connection and rapport despite the distance. So Linz, I'm going to put it now onto speaker thumbnail. So that means from a recording point of view, we'll see you. So over to you. So what trends have you picked up then?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a mixed bag really, and I just think it's really interesting how we're talking about staying connected, and literally 1 minute before you started my internet's just completely died. So what you couldn't see out of eye shot was I was running up and down the stairs rebooting the router, and I just thought, all the irony, you know, your connection's only as good as your Wi-Fi connection in reality.
Yeah.
So it's been a really interesting time. I've had lots of calls from people that are kind of going, you know, I really like working from home, this is great. Most of the time, some of the time I don't, and it's dealing with the bits where they don't. And I'm having other people that I'm having conversations and coaching, and it's a bit like, help me, I'm getting up in the morning and then I'm getting out of bed and sitting next to my desk, and I just can't sustain this. So yeah, it's been a really interesting time for people, and I think, as you said, we haven't been able to prepare for how this is going to be, because it's a world we didn't really know. And some people are finding it good, or parts of it is working for them, and other people are finding this not sustainable for them. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, really, Laura.
Yeah. Okay. And what I always find fascinating chatting with you, Linz, is just the psychological aspect you put in on this. So from a human psychology structural point of view, what are some of these things that potentially are getting triggered by not physically being able to be with each other?
And I think sometimes if you can understand what's going on for us, it makes it easier to know while I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable about it. I think there's some top level stuff where there's just, and you mentioned it with some of our personality types, there's a little bit of FOMO, you know, I want to be in the Zoom where it happens, you know, have I missed out on an important Zoom? You know, there's that fear of someone else is having the best meeting, I wasn't involved in that one. That's definitely started to creep in, like an anxiety around missing stuff. But on a deeper level, I think it's the reality that people know they are missing stuff. You know, when you're working in an office-based place where you're used to doing that, you know, if somebody marches through the office and there's, you know, having a bit of a rant or something, you know, you might just kind of go to somebody, which says so much, which goes, he's losing it today. But that human connection that says, I've spotted it, you've spotted it, and we're both going, what's going on there? That's a little bit of that human connection that says we're all in this together. I hope it's not us. But that is worth so much. And that's, you know, the quiet kick under the table when you're in a meeting, like that kind of stuff is the stuff we can't replicate on Zoom. And I think the unsaid human connection is the bit we're missing and not really understanding. So on a super level, it's missing out on those daily little stuff. You know, if I make a really good call with someone, or I have a really difficult call with somebody, and I put the phone down and somebody in the office goes, God, well done, Linz, that was tough, wasn't it? I go, God, that was a tough one. Yeah, all right, here we go again. I'm just re-bolstered, but I might be having that difficult call or the great call without any acknowledgement that that's gone on. I've got to pick myself up and make the next call, because I don't have that human connection that goes, yeah, well done, or tough call. So there's that kind of superficial level. And I think on a deeper level, it's our survival instincts that start being, you know, brought into play. You know, we have an unconscious fear of being kicked out the cave. So, you know, from a survival, from we all used to be cave people, you know, background, the person that got kicked out of the cave was the one that didn't survive. You know, if our tribe didn't want us, we're kind of out. So when you feel that other people are doing things and you're not involved, it's, you know, I think sometimes people can't even put their finger on what is wrong, but I think it's quite deep in our psyche around just feeling a need to belong. You know, and you mentioned it earlier in the call, I thought it was a really interesting point. We used to have, in the, you know, hundreds of years ago, we used to have a sense of community. We'd do stuff with our village or our town. We'd come together as families. You know, lots of that community-based stuff we used to feel, that sense of belonging, has been replaced by work. As you said, we spend so many hours there. So if we're not getting that, that's how do we replicate that? So for me, it's some humanness that's just missing. We're just missing out, and it is working. You know, it is working for some people. I'm not negating all of it, but how do they take that into consideration so they can continue to make it work is the key.
Yeah, Linz, love it. So let's be really practical about this. I think when this all started towards the, you know, in Q1 of this year, we were all sort of braced for the novelty, and, you know, it felt like a temporary thing. Depending on the time at which someone reads this, listens to this webinar again, you know, potentially for some industries, this is going to be the permanent next norm. So where this is maybe at the beginning, it would have felt like a temporary blip, and then we all crack on and have a big beer together and talk about, you know, where we're all at. Actually, for many industries, you know, I've certainly got friends in my personal network with whom they are not going to be going back to the office till minimum January. And that's nearly a whole year of where you're not going to be physically sitting back looking out that same window. And it may be forever. So what would you say would be some key things for anyone for whom this might be the permanent next normal that you've extracted from real life conversations with all the people that you've kind of been coaching? What are some things that have helped?
I think so. I think some of the team events that I've run recently in the last few weeks where teams are coming back together, it's really taking that time out to say, you know, how do we want to connect? As you said earlier, what some people might need and want will be different, and some of us aren't even aware enough to know what that is. But just having a conversation with other people and hearing somebody else saying, well, I think I need a bit of this, and I need a bit of a phone call on a Friday, or I need a quiz night. You know, I think I've started to hear of, you know, quiz phobia. You know, people go, let's do a quiz night. And they go, God, another quiz. You know, we've forced ourselves to do something to try and replicate what we call pastiming in psychological hungers, and need to talk on a lightweight way with a quiz. But that's an activity. That's not lightweight banter. So, you know, I think it's knowing what you each need. And I think some of this is about just taking it back to basics. So I think the first thing I put here is just pick up the foxing phone. You know, I'm hearing more and more when I'm coaching people is I'm feeling a bit disconnected. I go, who have you spoken to? They go, I don't like to call anybody. I can see their diaries booked out. So people are over booking spaces in diaries if they've got access to equal diaries, and leaving very little space in between for the stuff they might need to cover off, like, oh, did you watch Selling Sunset last night? That is the piece that's gone for some people. So just picking up the phone and saying to somebody, you know, how are you? How are you doing? That human, I can hear the emotion in your voice and I'm connecting with you. That you cannot replicate in an email. Hello, how are you? In an email, I'll be going, well, obviously I'm fine. Whereas when I ask you and I mean it, then I'm going to hear whether or not you actually do mean it in your voice. And then I may have more chance of answering or thinking about the answer. So I think go back to basics, pick up the phone.
And Linz, just to interject, is that just for the touchy-feely people, potentially like me?
No, this is not. This is absolutely not. I think recognition that we exist is a basic human need, regardless of our personality. If you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you've got shelter, water, all that stuff. You know, recognition that we exist is absolutely vital to us feeling psychologically sound. So, you know, just someone calling you and just going, you know, I know you're busy, but I just want to check in with and see how you're doing, how's it going, what you've been doing the weekend. That just says on an unconscious level, you exist, I know you exist. And regardless of personality type, if you're not that interested, you can cut the phone off, but never underestimate, you know, I'm fine, I'm all good, thanks, see you later. There will still be a benefit. No one gets offended by being cared about.
Oh, love it. Quote of the webinar, that.
And I think one thing we have seen more and more is because of this we call it Zoom locked, the Zoom locked day, where, I can't go to the toilet, so I've got my next Zoom call starting in a minute, where we're so booked out, is what we've started to see people using is what I call the voicemail. So we had a really tough week last week, our team, and I got a voicemail from one of my colleagues that just said, hiya, Linz, you know, I know you have got a really bad insect bite the other day. I had my leg up in the air all day, you know, just wondering how your leg is, and to let you know I'm thinking about you. And when I played that literally felt like a little gift, because somebody had taken a little bit of time out of the day to leave me a 1-minute message. So doing that, I open it at my pace. I open it when I want to. I can open it and I've got time. If I'm on the loo and I've got 5 minutes, I've got the time to receive that. And staying in connect, you know, kind of connecting in a way where I choose the time where I receive it so I can appreciate it, means I let it land. If it's a phone call, you might not have the time to take it in, and what you can hear is the emotion in the voice, and the sentiment with which it is sent is more real than the words you'll ever receive in an email. So if you can't phone, voicemail. And then what we're seeing more and more is just people never underestimate that our human needs to connect to humans. That's how we emotionally connect with other humans. And the challenge with doing this over Zoom is, you can see now, do I look in the phone? Do I look in the camera? Am I breaking up because of the internet? Our body language, which is what the greatest percentage of our language and communication is, gets slightly distorted. It's slightly off. You sometimes get in that little uncanny valley. It feels real, but it's not quite real. Sometimes just meeting up with somebody that's, you're 10 miles away from me, you're 20 miles away from me, let's meet in the middle, let's have a coffee. Never underestimate it. And that psychological need for stimulus and that psychological need for physical connection, bearing in mind that when we connect with humans, when we physically connect with a shake of the hand, then we've got to be careful how we do it, but just being present with somebody is literally good for our soul. So trying to do that where we can, even if it's just a couple of you pairing up for a coffee somewhere, that they will walk away with a sense of well-being. When we come together as humans, the energy that we bring, we leave with all the room. So that's the bit we can't really replicate on Zoom, because we don't always bring the same energy. Because I could sound like I'm listening, but I really could be playing Candy Crush on the side. I'm not, by the way.
Oh, Linz, how valuable. I have to say, no one ever gets offended by being cared about.
No one gets offended by being cared about.
What a fantastic quote. So just for those of you like a bullet point, JPUTFP, just pick up the Foxing phone. Recreating those off-the-cuff conversations. Love that little voicemail bit. I would have left you a voicemail, but I was busy doing my makeup, sorry. Physically connect when you can, even if those pairings are just those geographically closest. Oh, that's brilliant. And, I think amongst all of the theory, listen to real-life examples. So for anyone who maybe isn't interacted with anyone recently, this is a thing. Lots of people are experiencing it. And actually, there are just some thought and attention to it. There are some positives that we can sort of move on. So thank you so much, Linz. So we had our letter from our friend in need about feeling a bit disrupted, returning from furlough and feeling a bit kind of left out. So maybe there are some bunches of us who are withering a little bit on the grapevine. What can we do to create us to be luscious and juicy and plump and full of life and all that stuff that we know we are? How do we work together as a team so we're a great bunch together? It's life, Jim, but not as we know it. Changing how we with a team may not be bothering you right now, but let's not assume that's the same for everyone else. If you're fortunate enough to like or even love the people that you are paid to work with, then this is a set of relationships worth working for. So maybe it's an opportunity to evolve and level up our game in terms of how we interact. So my name's been Laura Thompson. We've been joined by the fabulous Lindsey Thompson-Wright, and hopefully that's given you some food for thought in terms of creating connection and rapport despite the difference. So look after yourselves. See you at the next one.